Today we're going to be talking about how to prep and paint bare steel. A few months ago I sanded these down and I used some POR 15 on the back side of them. Puts a protective coating on them, rust-free coating. Anyways, I want to talk about getting this surface ready to accept the primer. So what I like to do is I use an 80 grit, and I use this on a DA. But you have to understand the nature of the DA and how it subtracts itself, how it subtracts the grit from itself while it's orbiting and oscillating, and you don't really get a true 80 grit scratch. You get more of a like a 150 when you're using the DA. But if I was to take this off of here and use my hand, I would get a true 80 grit scratch in that steel. So it's okay to put this on the DA and hit this surface, because you're not going to deep scratch the steel. So if you're doing this by hand though, what you would want to use is like a 180 grit. Now this gives you the perfect scratch to accept and grab and bite the primer. Then I'm going to take this one step further. Well, first I'm going to show you the scratches that we get out of the 180. 180 by hand, you get a nice even scratch, stays smooth. Get a nice scratch pattern out of that. I went ahead, I already scuffed this whole wheel, including the lip. When you're scuffing a wheel like this, you want to scuff the lip also. You want to make sure any surface that's going to get any paint on it gets scratched, so it'll accept all the primers and then all the paints. And you definitely want to use some primer on this for reasons like this here. It's kind of a manufacturing gouge of some sort, but that's right in where the bead seal is, the bead seat for the tire. And you want to make sure that gets coatings on it. You want to make sure it's sanded smooth. Also, valve stem goes. I went ahead and I took my grinder and I smoothed that out because it had some lips on it, some sharp lips that kind of stuck up a little bit. So I went ahead and I smoothed those out with the grinder. Now that I hit them with the 180, now they're going to get primer and paint on them also. So additionally, I'm going to be using a self-etching primer. And this primer takes a catalyst, and the catalyst makes it bite bare steel. And this is what you want to use when you're painting bare steel. This is where you start. You could get away with using a direct to metal primer. Some 2K urethane primers are direct to metal, but these are wheels, and they're going to see a lot of road action, rocks, dirt, putting the tires on them, stuff like that. So I want to make sure that this primer bites the steel hard. And this two-part system has a reaction that actually it's an acid etch, and it etches itself into the steel. So I'm going to go ahead and get my primer mixed up and lay down some primer on these wheels. Before I do that, I'm going to wipe them down with some prep all. I've talked about this before. Wax and grease remover, especially on bare steel, your hands and your fingers will leave an imprint on the bare steel. If you're handling it at all, the oils from your skin will be left on the bare steel, and it could cause the primer to not adhere to those spots. Also, the oils from your fingers in your hands is acidic, and it could potentially rust some bare steel. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to prep all these up, and then they'll be ready to spray. So if you have a wheel like this that has an inner lip like this here, you don't want to spray your prep all directly on the wheel, because it'll get down in there and it'll never dry, and it'll just mess up your paint job. So I like to squirt it on the rag first, and then I apply it like that. So you always want to be fully prepared when you're using anything like this, any kind of paint. You want to be wearing a mask. You don't want to be breathing this stuff in. But you definitely don't want to walk into some place where they just got done spraying this stuff without a mask. This stuff here, it mixes 1 part catalyst to 1 part primer. And you got to let this stuff sit for 15 minutes after you mix it. So you mix it up and you allow it to sit for 15 minutes. And what that's doing is the chemical reaction in it, the chemical properties are starting to react, and that's when you use it. And like I said before, this is an acid etch, self-etching primer, and it's harsh, super harsh. So I went ahead and I put 2 brand new filters on my mask, plus I added an extra pre-filter so that I can take those pre-filters off after I'm done spraying this stuff. And also, you got to let this stuff sit for 30 minutes to an hour before top coating, which is quite lengthy in today's standards with today's paints. I'm using my FLG4. I like using this gun for stuff like this because it comes apart really easy and you can clean it out quick. With that kind of self-etch, acid etch primer, you want to get your gun cleaned out fast. Also using a disposable cup because it is self-etching primer and it will bite into an aluminum cup. So here we go. Even in between coats, I'm going to go ahead and clean this out. About 30 minutes. I'll put the primer back to it and spray another coat. So what you saw me do there at the very end was I adjusted my fluid way down to where hardly any fluid was coming out, and then I turned my pressure up to get that real smooth finish to make it paint ready. That way I don't have to sand it prior to the paint. Also wanted to use what was left in the gun. Now I got to clean my gun out before it ruins it. So what I got going on here is some Kirker Black Diamond Bourbon Brown. It's a cool color. Use the PPS cup today with the Segola 4600 Extreme. I'm going to use this to get a really nice smooth finish, and then I'm going to clear coat over top of it also. But, this PPS, I'm going to filter this paint into my cup, so I'm just going to tear this out of here. I cleaned off this cup, and I like to clean off these lids before I use them so no dust falls into my paint. It's ready to go. You always want to establish a light tack coat. So you got some windows and not full coverage. So what you saw me do there, the last step of the last coat was a drop coat, and that's where I dropped the pressure down and kind of just wildly put a coat paint on. What that has the tendency to do is it brings out the metallics, brings them to the top. I want these root beer brown metallics to pop. It's time to drop some clear coat down. Got it mixed up. Got the Segola. Here we go. So I was using this Segola 4600 Extreme DVR clear. I set this up with one fluid turn in, 2.1 bar, which is roughly 29 psi, and full fan with the high solids clear, and I got some pretty good results. I didn't get any fisheye or any orange peel in this. I think I'll continue to use it like that. Bam.